Welcome. Whether you're a student of psychotherapy or just a curious soul on YouTube, wondering why your therapist sometimes just sits there, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into therapeutic presence as an intervention. That might sound a bit clinical, but hang with me. We're going to keep it simple, practical, relatable, and yes, a little funny when appropriate, because therapy is beautiful and serious. And also, sometimes just really, really human. By the end of this talk, you'll be able to define therapeutic presence, understand how your nervous system affects your presence and your client's presence, and vice versa. You'll learn how internal family systems, or IFS, frames presence as something called self energy. You'll see how presence helps during silence, overwhelm, grief, and shutdown. Ready? Deep breath, shoulders down. Here we go. Well, what is therapeutic presence? Therapeutic presence is a state of attuned, grounded openness. It's not just sitting across from somebody and nodding, yes, no. It's being fully emotionally, mentally, and physically present, not lost in your thoughts, not planning your next brilliant insight. It's definitely not wondering if you left the stove on. No. It's less about what you say and more about who you are and how you are. Your whole nervous system is oriented and towards connection and safety. Your breath is steady, your voice is calm, and your posture says, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Presence isn't about being in a trance. It's about being with the client as a full human being. Creating a relational atmosphere where even the unsaid is felt. Sometimes they won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how they felt with you. That builds trust, and trust opens the door to everything else. A quick trip into neuroscience. I promise it's painless, but here's the point. Humans are wired to connect. Our nervous systems are always talking, even without words. That process, it's called co-regulation. One person's regulated nervous systems help regulate another person's nervous system. And thanks to polyvagal theory, we know that safety is tied to our autonomic state. Ventral vagal is calm and connected. Sympathetic, anxious and reactive. The dorsal, numb, shut down. If your nervous system is steady, you can help regulate someone else's nervous system. If you're rushing or anxious, your client feels that too. You've all experienced this by walking to a house, somebody's anxious and nervous, the atmosphere is there. You can give off a calm, steady nervous system atmosphere that your client will feel. So your present isn't fluff, it's actual biology. A client came in mid-panic, heart racing, pressured speech. I didn't jump in with tools. I slowed my breath. I softly said, I'm here. We can slow down. She didn't just hear it, she felt it. Her body rhythm matched mine. When babies cry, what calms them? Not advice, not information, a calm, attuned human. Because on the biological level, that's the same from the moment you're born to the moment you die. So the same goes for adults. We just cry more quietly. Well, at least usually. Therapist present is a biological intervention. Your voice, your face, your breath send message of safety. or threat. It's not performance, it's regulation. That's the skill. Let's zoom out for a moment. Therapeutic presence isn't exclusive to one model of therapy. In fact, it's one of the few threads that runs throughout nearly every modality. Presence may look different across frameworks, but it matters everywhere. So let's take a closer look at a few key approaches. Humanistic therapy, developed by Carl Rogers, puts presence front and center. Rogers emphasized three core conditions: unconditional positive regard, empathy, and congruence. These aren't just skills. These are postures, internal states, ways of being. To offer unconditional positive regard, you have to be truly present. No evaluations, no diagnosis, just deep, radical acceptance of the human being who is in front of you. Empathy in this context isn't parroting back what the client said, it's entering their world without losing contact with your own. Feeling with them, not for them. Holding their experience gently in your nervous system. And congruence, that third part, perhaps the most vulnerable one, means being real. Means your outside matches your inside. It's authenticity in motion. So in humanistic therapy, present isn't just part of the work, it is the work. The therapist's presence is the intervention. Yeah, I'll tell you like this. One therapist shared that during a client's shame spiral, she sat, tears in her own eyes, not out of pity, but resonance. After that, the client said, "You didn't shrink away. That was the first time I didn't feel disgusting." That's presence. No interpretation, no reframe, just unflinching empathy. And on the other end of the therapeutic spectrum, we can talk about psychodynamic therapy. In psychodynamic therapy, presence is more subtle. It's more about tracking unconscious processes and not just listening to the content. You're listening to affect, timing, silence, shifts in posture, and to your own reactions. Presence here is less warm glow and more deep attunement. It's about emotional containment, offering stable, safe enough space where unconscious material can surface. This requires a particular kind of presence, one that's calm, alert, receptive, even when the client is pushing against you or pushing away. So, let's say you may notice a client always looks away when sadness approaches. Or you might feel a heaviness in the room right before they dissociate. Your ability to remain grounded in these moments, not to push, not to fix, not to withdraw, that's presence. And your own countertransference, that becomes diagnostic information, and very important diagnostic information. And you might feel bored, irritated, or over-responsible. A present therapist will notice these internal states without acting on them. They'll hold the emotion, reflect on it, and use it to deepen the work. A colleague once said, my client suddenly went silent, and I noticed I wanted to change the topic, but I stayed with that urge instead. Cultivated that urge without acting upon it. When I finally said something heavy just entered the room, she burst into tears. She'd been holding back her grief the whole session. It was the presence of the therapist that allowed that moment to unfold. With CBT, particularly TEAM-CBT, which was created by David Burns, presence is integrated into the structure of therapy. Here, empathy is measured every single second. Clients rate how connected, understood, and respected they feel before you move into problem solving or skill building. So, what happens if the client gives you a low rating? That happens to be considered a very good situation because that's when you can actually get into therapeutic work. You don't push ahead, you stop, you reflect, and you reconnect on where the client is at the time. This ensures that presence isn't bypassed in favor of productivity. It also encourages the therapists to develop moment by moment self-awareness. Presence in TEAM-CBT is less about long silences and more about moment-to-moment feedback. If the client says, "You're really not hearing me," don't defend. You pause. You think, where is she actually telling the truth? And you notice, and you say, "You're right." And that matters. I wasn't listening to 100%. Let's talk about how that made you feel and what that meant. That's presence in motion. A team therapist once shared that after a beautifully executed cognitive intervention, the client gave her a 4 out of 10 on empathy. Rather than feel defeated, she used the feedback to slow down, reconnect, and validate. That pivot was the turning point in therapy, and presence made the process work. So, in summary, across these models, Humanistic, Psychodynamic, CBT, present may be different. It may take a different shape, but the function is the same: to foster safety, to deepen emotional connection, and to support the unfolding of what needs to be felt, known, and healed. In each approach, we see that the presence is not optional. It's not an extra. It is the foundation. Whether you're offering unconditional acceptance, containing grief with steadiness, or pausing because empathy scores dipped, presence is the therapeutic frame. Without it, it becomes mechanical. With it, the work becomes alive. Let's talk internal family systems, or IFS. If you're new to it, don't worry. This will be clear, practical, and relevant. Because IFS gives us one of the most elegant ways to understand presence. Not as a behavior, but as an energy. What is IFS? Internal Family Systems, developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, starts with a simple and powerful idea. We are not one monolithic self. We are a system of parts, each part with its own thoughts, feelings, and intentions. There are different types of parts. There's the manager part that tries to control everything, a perfectionist that avoids shame, an inner critic that believes it's keeping us safe, a wounded child holds grief or trauma, a protector that lashes out to keep us from being hurt again. These are all possible parts, and they all have jobs. And they all carry wisdom, even if their methods seem extreme and not necessarily effective. But at the core of every person, there is the self. When you say, "I wasn't being myself," who is that I who wasn't being the self? It's the self. It's the core of the person. According to IFS, it's something very deep. Self is not a part. It's the natural leader of our internal system, and it has specific qualities. Dr. Schwartz gives them the names of 8 C's: calm, curiosity, compassion, clarity, courage, confidence, creativity, and connectedness. And what's interesting is this self, you're born with it and it is never damaged. It doesn't need to be earned or built. It's already there beneath all that noise that we have going on in our life. So, what is the goal of the therapy then? It's to help the clients access more of this self energy. So, their parts, the part that gets angry, the part that wants to save you from shame, all those parts can begin to relax, heal, and trust. Now, in therapy, it's the therapist's self that matters most. And here's where we can get really profound. In IFS, the therapist's job is not to fix, not to teach, not to direct. It's to lead from self to help the clients do the same. Presence, then, is not a strategy. It's the felt sense of self. When you, as a therapist, are in self, your clients' parts, their parts, feel it. Even though they don't know the words, even though they've never felt it before. So let me tell you a story a therapist shared. He says like this: I was working with a teenage client full of sarcasm, eyes rolling. Nothing I said seemed to land. So I stopped trying to say the right thing. I dropped into self. I softened. I stayed with him. He eventually said, "You're not like the others. You're not trying to fix me." And in that very moment, everything changed. He didn't respond to technique. He responded to presence. Well, what does it look like to be in self? It doesn't mean being neutral or expressionless, as one might find in classical psychodynamics. It doesn't mean soft-spoken all the time. Being in self means that your nervous system is regulated. You're not blended with a part that's trying to impress, rescue, or manage. You can feel the client's pain, but without being overwhelmed by it. You can be curious about resistance without taking it personally. And you can be quiet without feeling helpless. In session, when you're in self, you trust the process, even when it's messy. You make space for silence without fear. You see the client, not just behavior, but their wholeness. And that's what the parts respond to. Let's get real. We all get blended with our parts sometimes. And blended, I mean that our self gets pulled into a part which is not necessarily going to lead us to act in the best possible way. What does that mean? You might notice yourself thinking, I need to sound smart right now. Another thought might come to you, I hope they like me, or I don't think they like me. Another possible thought is, I need to get them to cry so this session feels productive. I mean, those are all coming from specific parts. They're usually trying to protect you from feeling ineffective, unseen, or not enough. In IFS, the invitation is this. Instead of shaming those parts, get curious about them, befriend them, and ask yourself, can I ask this part to step back just for now so myself can lead? That question alone is demonstrative of presence. In IFS, presence is more than a posture. It's not something you do. It's something who you are. When you're in self, your energy says, I'm with you, all of you, and I'm not afraid of what you carry. You don't need perfect interventions. You don't need to say just the right thing at just the right time, because your presence, Your calm, open, compassionate nervous system is already doing the work. One therapist described sitting silent with a client who had just shared something deeply shameful. The therapist didn't jump in with reassurance. She just stayed present, calm, gentle, attuned. After a long silence, the client said, "I feel like you see all of me. You're still here." That's self-energy. That's presence. So, anytime you feel stuck in a session, or uncertain or triggered, pause and ask, am I in self right now? Am I fully attuned to the client? Don't start thinking, what should I say? Or which one of the tools do I have to use? Or what is the right answer? But say, am I grounded, open, connected to this very moment? If yes, stay there. Let that energy lead. If not, that's okay. Notice the part. Befriend it. Breathe. And see if it will give you a little space. The shift alone can change the entire session. So, in IFS, presence isn't about performance. It's about permission. It's about being fully with the client so that their parts feel safe enough to speak. And when they speak, you don't need to fix them. Just listen from self, with self, and that is the intervention. Let's bring this down from theory right into the therapy room. Because present doesn't always shine brightest in calm, easy moments. It reveals its true power in moments of difficulty, vulnerability, and rupture. Let's look at a few of those moments. Real, common, subtle, and powerful. In silence, for instance, a soft pace. The client stops talking. You could feel the air thinking. Maybe the eyes drop. They sigh. And suddenly, you feel the urge to say something, anything, to lighten the moment, to break the tension, to feel useful. But presence says, stay. A young woman came to therapy after a breakup that had completely shattered her sense of self. She was high achieving, articulate, driven, but this grief had taken her voice. It was our third session. She arrived, she sat down and said nothing. She stared at her hands, twisting a silver ring on her finger. 10 seconds passed. Then 30. Then a full minute. I tell you, it felt like an hour. Everything in me wanted to speak, to rescue her, to offer her insight, to fill the space. But I didn't. I softened my body, lowered my gaze, not to avoid, but to de-intensify, and I stayed with her. I breathed. I mirrored her breathing. Eventually, her shoulders began to shake. Silent tears ran down her face. Still, I stayed with her. Finally, after I don't know how much time has passed, she said in a whisper, "Thank you so much for not making me talk." That silence, it wasn't emptiness. It was safety. It was presence. The client begins to spiral. Tears, panic, racing thoughts. Their system is no longer anchored. They're adrift in a stormy sea. You may feel an instinct to intervene with technique, tell them box breathing or reframing or grounding something. But first, your presence is needed. Because what overwhelms the nervous system needs is another nervous system that isn't overwhelmed. So, for instance, there was a man in his 30s, a father of two. He came into session after learning that his daughter might have contracted a very serious neurological condition. And he was usually stoic, strong, composed. But today, he unraveled. He couldn't sit still. His hands were shaking. His worlds tumbled over each other. I can't lose her. I can't do this. What if? What if? What if? I felt my own chest tighten. I didn't reach for a tool. I reached for my breath. I lowered my voice and said his name, James. I'm here. Let's take this one breath at a time. I didn't explain. I didn't analyze. I simply stayed with him, allowing him to center. His breathing slowed. His eyes met mine. And he said, "You're not scared of me now. That's helping." That's presence. Not performance, not protocol, just plain and simple therapeutic presence. Another situation, not uncommon, is when you need to show your presence in situations of grief. Because grief doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be witnessed, held, honored. When a client is in grief, raw, real grief, the most powerful thing we can do is not to look away. A woman came. She was in her late 50s. She came after the loss of her adult son. Actually, it had been 3 months already, and people around her had started telling her to move on or to be strong. As she sat across from me, she pulled a picture of him out of her bag and whispered, "He used to call me every Sunday." Then she broke. She started crying, sobbing, filling the room. No words could have held that. I didn't speak. I didn't pull out my handy box of tissues. I let the wave come. It's okay. Let it go. And when it quieted, I said softly, "You don't have to move on here. You get to be exactly where you are." She looked up. Her face streaked with tears and said, "Thank you for letting me love him out loud." That's therapeutic presence. It doesn't shrink from sorrow. It stays right beside it. Now, sometimes it's not an overwhelming emotion that comes to your office. The client doesn't yell, cry, or panic. They go flat, detached, mechanical. I don't care. I don't know. And you might feel your own system begin to disengage also. But therapeutic presence here is not about pushing them to feel. Again, it's about staying with them, even when they can't feel. I was working with a teenager quite a few years ago. He came to me because lack of emotion. He answered questions with shrugs. He kept his hood up. He didn't make eye contact. Midway through, I think the fourth session, he said, I don't see the point of talking. Nobody actually listens. I felt my frustration rise. But instead of pushing for insight or connection or correction, I paused. I softened my posture and said, I think you're right. A lot of people don't listen the way they should. I might not be listening, but I really want to. He didn't say anything. The rest of the session, he didn't say anything. But the next week he came back, he took off his hood. The week after that, he started talking to me about the music he was into. And by week 6, he cried for the first time in 5 years. Presence doesn't demand. It waits with. That's how the parts start to feel safe. So let's be clear. Presence is not doing nothing. It's doing something radically human. It's showing up with your whole entire nervous system, open, grounded, attuned. When another person's system has gone offline, it's not empty silence, it's full silence. It's not avoiding grief, it's allowing it. It's not detachment, it's deep connection without control. Clients feel that, not in their minds, but straight in their bodies. I want to take a moment and pose some reflection questions for the therapist or the budding therapist. So go ahead, take a moment, pause, and turn inward. And I want you to ask yourself, when do you feel most present in session? When you're regulated, confident, not rushed? And on the other hand, when do you check out? When a client is angry? When you feel helpless? And what are the parts of you that interfere with presence? Is it the part that wants to impress? Is it the part that's afraid of silence? And when that happens, what can you do? What helps you come back to the stance of therapeutic presence? A breath, deep breathing, a mantra, a phrase, just a pause to reconsider and recenter? And think, how does self-energy feel in your body? A soft chest, a warm belly, an open face. Take a moment to think about that. These questions won't lead you to perfection. I don't think that's achievable. But they will lead to presence. And like we saw from polyvagal theory, co-regulation, the client can feel that. So in conclusion, presence is not a bonus. It's not a nice to have. It is an extremely important intervention in of itself, because that's what allows healing to happen. In IFS, we call it self-energy. In neuroscience, we can call it co-regulation. In therapy in general, we call it everything. So the next time you're in a therapy room, as a client or a therapist, ask, what's here right now? Or more importantly, who's here right now? Who, in sense of which part of me? Is it yourself? Because that might be the most powerful intervention of all. So thanks for watching, and hey, if all else fails, just breathe. And then, of course, maybe check the stove.